Good morning, Tony Dottino here, founder of the USA Memory Championship, and we're in the process of hosting and conducting our 26th USA Memory Championship. So time is moving. July 12th is coming faster than we can keep track of, and then we're here at Full Sail University in August conducting our 26th USA Finals for the Memory Championship. And as I did last week, I had just I get the Saturday Evening Post, and in the current issue, and I say May, June of 2025, this is the cover of it. I just love the magazine. It has a very simple and basic article, but powerful and easy to understand, which I love about it. I think Patty, let me make sure I get her name right because I want to give her a lot of credit because I think she did a superb job here of really nailing this work. And I just, shame on me, Patty McCracken. It's MC capital CRACKEN. I think she's done a really great job of making the techniques and the skills that they are brain boosters simple for people to comprehend, which is always the amazing part I have found about memory. And she really writes this here very well, by which she says, the hardest thing is to convince people that these memory techniques and skills actually work. Now, running the Memory Championship for 25 years, I would find that the biggest and hardest thing that we've found that people can believe that they can, in fact, improve their memories at any age. And as simple as that sounds, you would think people would just kind of migrate to that and would want to learn to do that, since so many people are worried about losing their memory. So here in this Saturday Evening Post, I think Patty does a superb job of interviewing and talking with Dr. Richard Restak, who actually presented at one of our USA Championship finals a Monte Grappa pen to the winner, which was just amazing. It was a pen shaped in the form of a brain, and getting to meet with him in Washington at the Bethesda Academy, Naval Academy, Hospital, Bethesda Naval Hospital at the time, and speaking with him subsequent to that as he wrote his latest book, The Complete Guide to Memory, has just been terrific. But here's what he says. The hardest thing is to convince people that these memory methods or skills actually work. They do. And they're easy to do, and it's very easy to check yourself. It's something you should do daily. He implores people to actually utilize their creative minds, which is something I learned over 30 years ago from Tony Buzan, which is to improve creativity, there's a natural link to improving memory. How do you input information into your brain? So what's the way you do it? And that's something you got to think about in advance. How do you then put it in there so it stores, so it's retained, so you can then subsequently decide to hook it, pull it out, which are the fundamentals, the first step of the creative process, so that as you see new information coming to you, you can add it to what you've already got, and bang, the brain will have a spontaneity of creativity, which I found fascinating when I started to study the power of the human mind in our creative process. So here comes, the science behind all this, and then comes the brain boosters that she closes this article with, which I just think was, again, done very, very well. This was one I had never heard before, right? Have someone set an alarm off at a time that you don't know. So you have no idea when the alarm is going to go off. And sometimes when you're not working, so obviously it may be something you do on a weekend, and maybe during the evening, maybe after dinner and before watching. Somewhere during the day, have a friend set up an alarm that boom, and it goes off. When the alarm sounds, note your thoughts. So you hear alarm, and then you say, okay, what am I thinking right now? But here was the interesting thing. Recall the thought immediately before the alarm went off. So what were you thinking about before the alarm actually went off? And then track back as far as you can. So what were you thinking about before the alarm went off? What were you thinking about before that thought? What were you thinking about before that thought? It's an interesting exercise. And with practice, what she's suggesting here in the exercise boosters is that you should be able to get back to a dozen thoughts. What were you thinking about 12 times before the alarm went off? Which I've never heard, read. So I find this is unique and special, and it really is simple, and it should be fun if you can actually back that up and think about what you were doing. So I've tried this, and I'll tell you, it's amazing how far back. You can probably go back even further than 12, but it's like, how far do you want to go back and say, my goodness, relive your life? It's like a history book. A second one that she writes about as a brain booster, I found equally interesting. I hadn't ever thought about this one. So these are some unique things, and I've been at this for 30 years, so I found it really nice to know I can still read something on memory after 30 years and find something I've never heard before. But this is gathering loose change. Lay out a handful of nickels, dimes, pennies, and quarters. You got that? Nickels, dimes, pennies. I don't know why she didn't start with pennies, dimes, and nickels, a quarter. It doesn't matter. The 4 different coins that we have, and hopefully we keep, I guess maybe someday don't have pennies and nickels, but in any case, lay them out. Next, pick them up, the pennies, totaling them in your mind. So pick up the pennies, the nickels, the dimes, and the quarters, and do a total. Okay, that should be fairly simple. We do that in the Memory Institute, so that's a skill that we do bring, and we have people do pennies, dimes, nickels, and quarters, and they total them up, say how much change do you have. But this is what was the ultimate challenge, and I found unique and different. Select a group of coins that add to that sum, but then put a random grouping, keeping your pennies first and your dimes and nickels and quarters, and keep it, how many pennies did I have? So you have to remember how many pennies, then how many dimes, how many quarters, what was the total of my quarters, what was the total of my nickels, what was the total of my pennies, what was the total of my dimes, individually, and like calling them in silos. And that's an interesting twist to just adding up what the changes that you have, but what is it you have by each of the separate denominations. Number 3, memorize a poem. Make it 10 lines. And what does that all do? You know, we had, when we were doing live USA Memory Championships, we gave the mental athletes a 50-line poem that they had to remember the lines, the punctuation mark, the spelling, the bolding, the italics. And so it was always an interesting exercise as people learned to improve their memories in remembering 50 lines of poetry. And we'd give out points to the maximum of 500 points. And we would do that live and give them a poem. We'd get a poet. First of all, it was always fun getting someone to write the poetry. So we always found a poet. If somebody who liked to write poetry, it gave them a chance to get their works publicized and published in a memory championship. And then we'd give the printed copy to the mental athletes, and then they would have to write out. So we give them a blank piece of paper, and they'd have to write out. And you'd score that. You're giving them points for each word and each punctuation, and whether it was italicized, to the point where the event was 500 points. And here he talks about, or here Patty writes, record yourself reading the poem, then listen to it until you recall it on your own. There's a rhyme to it, there's a way of focus, there's a meaning to it, there's a syntax, all woven together to create a melody in the poetry. And boy, I've never been one big on poetry, but as they're reading the technique here and what she writes in this Saturday Evening Post article, I found it very interesting. The next tip that she gets is, how do you take numbers and remember strings of numbers? And the technique that she describes here is not one that I particularly like to use, though there are so many different techniques on numbers. But Dr. Restek advised that you would turn each number into an image. So number 7 may be a flag, 8 may be a chain link, 5 may be a sailboat. So you create images for all of these so that each number is an image, so that when you string a number together, 9, 2, 6, 1, 5, you have imagery that you're connecting, which is a little bit easier for your brain to retain. I like to group my numbers, as I learned from a Purdue University student. She does swimming, and she linked her numbers into her swimming pattern, so she'd get 4 digits and do a story about her swimming. And that was a fascinating technique to learn as another way. A race, if you're doing a race or if you're driving, how you can string numbers together and just make up a story of the numerics that you're following. And finally, Dr. Restek, this is so important. Take breaks in between. So people, especially a lot of students we've worked with, they try to cram, right? They do the nighttime cram sessions. It's exam time right now, so we're all cramming until 2 o'clock in the morning. When in actuality, you get people to stop every 45 minutes and take a 5-minute break. Do not do anything stressing or driving yourself crazy, but take a break. And people that we've coached with that do that have found that their memories are actually improved of what they're trying to retain, and we have them go through a specific process for what they do during that break, but then what do they do when they come back from the break, and how it enhances their ability to retain and recall information for the long term. So that is the last part that I plan to do with this, but I would like to congratulate Patty McCracken after doing the USA Memory Championships for 25, coming to 26 years, and studying memory for more than 30 years, and having the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Richard Restek on multiple occasions. I just think she's done a superb job in this particular article, and really broke it down into a way where people can understand it and believe, you know what, I might be able to do this. And that's been the struggle we've had for 26 years, to get people to realize you can, in fact, improve your memory, given, number one, the belief that you can, the willingness to study and learn what the skills and the methods and systems may be, which Restek says, hey, they actually work, which I've got 26 years of experience to see that they're working. And then taking the time to practice. And then maybe if you want to be bold enough, come into the USA Memory Championship. So check us out, usamemorychampionship.com, and maybe you too can become a USA Memory mental athlete.